The Wayfinder hummed with a steady, mechanical rhythm, a sound that Lena Morales had come to associate with home. She wiped her hands on the greasy rag tucked into her belt and glanced at the glowing console in front of her. The freighter's engine readings were stable for once, no anomalies, no fires to put out. It was almost disappointing. "Morales," came a voice through the intercom. Sharp and commanding. "Bridge, now." Lena winced. Captain Voss didn't summon anyone unless there was trouble. Her boots echoed against the metal decking as she climbed the ladder to the bridge. The moment she stepped in, she felt it, an undercurrent of unease. "What's going on?" she asked, brushing a strand of dark hair out of her face. Voss stood at the central console, his broad shoulders hunched. He was a grizzled veteran, his face etched with lines of a man who had survived too many close calls. The rest of the crew clustered around him. Tasha, the no-nonsense navigator, Cole Reeves, the senior engineer Lena grudgingly respected, and Mira, the ship's comms officer, who was furiously typing into her console. "We're picking up a signal," Voss said, his voice low and steady. Lena frowned. "From where?" "There's nothing out here but empty space." "Not empty," Tasha muttered, gesturing at the holographic star map. A deep scar of swirling light stretched across the display, the Gallia Rift. Lena's stomach tightened. Everyone knew the rift was a no-go zone, an expanse of uncharted space marked by gravitational anomalies and eerie, unexplainable phenomena. Ships that entered rarely came back. "We're not going in there," Lena said flatly. "That's what I said," Cole grunted. "But the captain's got other ideas." "Quiet," Voss snapped. He pointed at the signal on the display, a rhythmic pulse that repeated every few seconds. "This isn't just noise. It's structured, too precise to be random. Could be a distress call, could be abandoned tech. Either way, it's worth checking out." Lena glanced at Mira. "What do the scans say?" Mira shook her head, her brow furrowed. "Nothing clear. The signal's weird. It's like it's there, but it's not. Keeps shifting frequencies, almost like it's moving." "Or like it's alive," Tasha added under her breath. A chill ran down Lena's spine. "Captain, the rift's dangerous. We don't know what's in there. Is this really worth the risk?" Voss turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "This ship runs on risk, Morales. We're going in. Full diagnostic on the engines, now. If we're doing this, I want to know she can take it." Lena opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Voss wasn't the type to change his mind once it was made up. "Fine," she muttered. "But don't say I didn't warn you." As she headed back to the engine room, the Wayfinder altered course, its thrusters firing in short bursts to angle the ship toward the Gallia Rift. Outside the viewport, the stars seemed to shimmer and twist, as if the rift was already reaching out to greet them. Hours later, the tension on the ship was palpable. Lena worked with Cole to reinforce the ship's systems, bolting down loose panels and triple-checking the engines. Despite her best efforts, unease gnawed at her. Every spacer had heard the stories, ships disappearing without a trace, strange lights in the rift, and whispers of an intelligence lurking within its depths. The Wayfinder reached the edge of the rift, and Lena found herself on the bridge again, watching as the swirling mass of distorted light filled the viewport. "This is insane," she muttered. "Maybe," Voss said. "But if we find something valuable in there, it'll pay off big." Myra's voice cut through the air. "The signal's getting stronger. I think it's leading us deeper in." Voss nodded. "Tasha, take us in slow. Keep an eye on the sensors." The freighter slid forward, and the rift swallowed them whole. The shift was immediate. The steady hum of the ship grew uneven, vibrations rattling through the hull. Outside, the stars twisted into streaks of color, and faint, flickering shapes darted through the void. "Gravitational flux increasing," Tasha reported. "Stabilizers holding, but it's rough." "Engines are overcompensating," Cole added. "I'll need to adjust output manually." As the crew worked to keep the ship steady, Lena's gaze drifted to the viewport. For a moment, she thought she saw something, a shadow flitting across the swirling light. It was gone before she could be sure. Then the ship shuddered violently, throwing her against the console. "What the hell was that?" she shouted. "Something's pulling us," Mira yelled. "It's like the signal's grabbing us." Lena scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. Alarms blared as the Wayfinder lurched forward, dragged deeper into the rift. Outside, the swirling light grew brighter, and the shadows returned, coalescing into faint, ghostly forms. "Captain," Mira cried. "We're not alone out here." The signal's pulse grew louder, reverberating through the ship like a heartbeat. Lena gritted her teeth, her hands clenched into fists. They had crossed into the unknown, and it wasn't about to let them go. The Wayfinder groaned as unseen forces pulled it deeper into the Gallia rift. Lena clung to the edge of her console in the engine room, the vibrations rattling her teeth. The ship's stabilizers were straining, their whine growing louder with every passing second. "Cole," she shouted over the din. "How much longer can they hold?" "Not long," Cole shouted back, his grizzled face slick with sweat as he wrestled with the controls. "We need to redistribute the power, or we're gonna shear this bucket in half." "On it." Lena's fingers danced over the control panel, bypassing secondary systems to funnel more energy to the stabilizers. Sparks flew from an overloaded conduit, and the sharp tang of burning insulation filled the air. "Morales!" Captain Voss's voice barked through the intercom. "What's happening down there?" "We're holding it together for now," she yelled back, her voice tinged with frustration. "But the rift's throwing everything it's got at us." "Keep it together," Voss growled. "We're getting close to the source of the signal." Lena slammed her fist against the panel. "Of course we are," she muttered under her breath. On the bridge, the crew was barely faring better. The swirling lights of the rift seemed to press against the viewport, casting the room in a kaleidoscope of colors. Mira sat at her station, frantically typing as she tried to pinpoint the origin of the signal. "It's changing again," she cried. "The frequency's fluctuating, like it's alive." "Alive?" Voss snapped. "What the hell does that mean?" Mira shook her head, her hands trembling. "I don't know, Captain. It's like it's reacting to us, adapting." Tasha swore under her breath, gripping the controls. "Whatever it is, it's dragging us straight into the rift's gravity well. I can't pull us out." "Then don't fight it," Voss said, his jaw tight. "Let it take us where it wants. We need answers, not panic." "Answers won't mean much if we're dead," Tasha muttered, but she eased up on the thrusters, letting the ship glide deeper into the anomaly. In the engine room, Lena finished rerouting power and wiped her brow. "That should hold for now," she said, glancing at Cole. Cole grunted in acknowledgement, but his expression was grim. "This ship wasn't built for this kind of strain, Morales. We're lucky she hasn't come apart already." Lena shot him a glare. "Not helping." A sudden burst of static erupted from the comm panel, making both of them jump. At first, it was nothing but noise, a crackling hiss that set Lena's teeth on edge. But then, faint and distorted, a voice emerged. "Help, me!" Lena froze, her heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" Cole nodded, his eyes wide. "Yeah. And I don't like it." The voice repeated, clearer this time. "Help me, please." "It's the signal," Lena whispered. "It's not just a transmission. It's someone or something." Cole's expression hardened. "Whatever it is, it's messing with our ship. I don't care what it's saying, we need to get out of here." Before Lena could respond, the ship jolted violently, sending them both sprawling. The lights flickered, and the hum of the engines faltered. "Morales!" Voss's voice barked through the intercom. "We're losing power to the stabilizers. What the hell is going on down there?" Lena scrambled to her feet, her mind racing. "Something's interfering with the systems. I'll fix it, but..." Another jolt cut her off, and the lights went out entirely, plunging the room into darkness. On the bridge, the swirling lights outside grew brighter, casting eerie shadows across the crew's faces. The ghostly shapes that had been flickering on the edges of their vision were now unmistakable, vague, humanoid figures that seemed to drift through the rift like phantoms. "What are those?" Mira whispered, her voice trembling. No one answered. The figures moved closer, their shapes growing more distinct. They were tall and slender, their forms shimmering as if they were made of liquid light. They had no faces, only smooth, featureless heads that turned as if watching the ship. "Captain," Tasha said, her voice tight with fear. "I think they're trying to communicate." "How?" Voss demanded. Before she could answer, the signal on Myra's console spiked. The voice returned, louder and more insistent. "Help me, please. You're the only ones who can." In the engine room, the emergency lights flickered on, casting the space in dim red. Lena and Cole exchanged a look, their earlier arguments forgotten. We need to get back to the bridge, Lena said. Cole nodded. Agreed. Whatever's going on, we need answers. As they made their way through the ship, the Wayfinder groaned again, the sound echoing like a wounded animal. The walls seemed to ripple in the dim light, and Lena thought she saw movement out of the corner of her eye. Did you see that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Cole shook his head. Don't start seeing things now, Morales. Focus. But as they reached the ladder to the bridge, the shadows shifted again, and this time, Lena was sure of it. Something was following them. Hurry, she said, her voice tight. When they reached the bridge, the tension was palpable. The ghostly figures outside had stopped moving, hovering in the void like silent sentinels. Report, Voss snapped as Lena and Cole entered. Systems are barely holding, Lena said. And the signal's not just a transmission, it's talking to us. Voss nodded grimly. We heard it too. The voice returned, louder and more distinct than before. You must help me. The rift is dying. If you don't, it will take you with it. The crew stared at the console, their faces pale. What does that mean? Mira whispered. No one had an answer. But Lena's gut told her one thing. Whatever the rift was, it wasn't letting them leave without a fight. The Wayfinder was no longer a freighter slicing through the vast emptiness of space. It felt like a speck caught in the maw of something ancient, unfathomable, and alive. The hum of the engines was uneven, punctuated by sharp jolts that rattled the ship's frame. Outside, the swirling lights of the rift pulsed in rhythm with the voice now echoing through the ship's comms. You must help me, the voice pleaded, almost human, yet alien in its cadence. Lena stood at the bridge console, her hands braced against its edge as she stared at the flickering data. The voice was in the ship now, not just on the comms, but infiltrating the systems. It pulsed through the wires, weaving itself into their electronics like a parasite. I don't like this, Cole muttered, his voice gruff but strained. He was watching the viewport, where the ghostly figures outside hovered in a loose formation, unmoving. Whatever this thing is, it's screwing with everything, systems, gravity, maybe even our heads. Gravity's definitely off, Tasha added, her knuckles white as she clutched the controls. Every time I compensate, the ship lists in another direction. It's like it's pushing us where it wants. Captain, we can't just let this thing take over, Cole snapped, turning to Voss. We need to cut the signal off, purge it from the systems, and get the hell out of here. And how do you propose we do that, Reeves? Voss replied, his tone dangerously calm. The engines are barely functional, and we're caught in a gravity well. Without that signal, we lose navigation, stabilization, hell, probably life support too. Lena straightened, her mind racing. He's right, she said, cutting in before Cole could argue further. The signal's wormed its way into the core systems. It's not just a transmission anymore, it's part of the ship. If we shut it down, we might not survive. Cole threw up his hands. So what, we just sit here and let it take us wherever it wants. Voss slammed his fist on the console, silencing them. Enough. Morales, you said the signal's in the systems. Can you trace it? Figure out what it's trying to do? Lena hesitated. Maybe. But it's not like anything I've ever seen. The code's alien. It doesn't follow any logic I recognize, but it's trying to communicate. Voss's eyes narrowed. Then communicate back. Find out what it wants. Back in the engine room, Lena sat cross-legged on the grated floor, surrounded by a tangle of wires and open panels. The main console flickered with erratic streams of data, the alien code twisting across the screen like living tendrils. She'd seen corrupted systems before, but this was different. The code wasn't broken, it was evolving. All right, she muttered, plugging in her handheld diagnostic tool. Let's see what you've got. The screen lit up with a dizzying array of symbols and patterns. It felt like trying to read a language that was almost, but not quite, human. Fragments of meaning teased at the edge of her understanding, like half-remembered words from a dream. She isolated a cluster of the code and typed a basic query. Who are you? For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the screen blinked, and new symbols appeared. They resolved into words, clunky but clear. Help me. Rift dying. I am last. You are here. You must help. Lena's breath caught. You're the rift, she whispered. On the bridge, the tension was suffocating. The ghostly figures outside had begun to move, drifting closer to the ship. They glided with an unnatural smoothness, their liquid-like forms undulating as if caught in a current. "Captain," Mira said, her voice trembling, "they're getting too close." Voss stared at the viewport, his jaw clenched. "They haven't attacked. Not yet. Let's keep it that way." "Or they're waiting for the right moment," Cole muttered darkly. As if in response, the voice returned, echoing through the ship. "Help me. Help us. You are the only ones." "What do you mean, us?" Mira whispered, her eyes wide. Lena's voice crackled through the intercom. "Captain, I think I've got something." "Go ahead, Morales," Voss said. "I'm talking to the signal, or whatever it is. It says it's the rift, or what's left of it. There was a civilization here once, and the rift is all that remains." "Remains of what?" Tasha asked. "I don't know yet," Lena admitted. "But it's calling itself the last. Like it's the last survivor. And it's asking for help because the rift is collapsing. If it dies, everything caught in it dies too, including us." Voss's face was a mask of grim contemplation. "Can it stop the collapse?" "Maybe," Lena said. "But it needs us to build something. It sends schematics, some kind of device, but I don't understand how it works yet." Cole's voice cut through the calm. "Captain, this is a mistake. Whatever this thing is, it's manipulating us. It's got you chasing its scraps while it drags us deeper into this hellhole." "Cole, shut up and listen," Lena snapped. "If it wanted us dead, we'd already be dead. It's reaching out for help, not attacking." "How can you be so sure?" Cole shot back. Lena hesitated. "Because it's lonely," she said softly. "When I was reading the code, I felt it. It's desperate, scared." Cole snorted. "You felt it? Are we making decisions based on gut feelings now?" "Enough," Voss said, his voice hard. "Morales, can you build the device?" "Not alone," Lena admitted. "I'll need Cole's help." Cole looked like he wanted to argue, but Voss's glare silenced him. "Fine," he growled. "But when this goes sideways, don't say I didn't warn you." As Lena and Cole worked to decipher the alien schematics, the rift's grip on the ship tightened. The ghostly figures pressed closer, their shapes flickering like static. Every so often, the voice would return, urging them on, "Hurry. Not much time." "Morales," Cole muttered, soldering a circuit with practiced precision. "You really believe this thing's telling the truth?" "I don't know," Lena admitted, her eyes focused on the glowing diagram projected above the console. "But what choice do we have? Either we help it, or we die here." Cole sighed. Hell of a pep talk. The lights flickered again, and the ship shuddered violently. The ghostly figures were right outside the viewport now, their liquid forms pressing against the glass. For a moment, one of them seemed to look directly at Lena, its featureless face tilting as if in recognition. She shivered and turned back to the device. Whatever the rift was, it wasn't going to let them leave until they finished what it had started. The Wayfinder drifted deeper into the Gallia rift, its hull groaning under the relentless gravitational forces. The ghostly figures clung to the ship, their liquid forms flickering with pale light. Inside, tension thickened as the crew split between fear and resolve, the alien voices' constant pleas ringing in their ears. "Help me. Help us. Time is running out." Lena and Cole worked tirelessly in the engine room, surrounded by tools and fragments of machinery scavenged from the ship. The schematics provided by the signal hovered above the console, their alien symbols twisting and shifting. Despite their differences, the two engineers had fallen into an uneasy rhythm, their shared expertise driving them toward a singular goal, building the device. "Pass me the coupling wrench," Lena said, her voice tight with focus. Cole handed it over, grunting. "This better work, Morales. I'm not keen on dying in some glowing death trap because we trusted a voice in the wires." "It'll work," Lena replied, though she didn't feel as confident as she sounded. On the bridge, Captain Voss stood with his arms crossed, watching the ghostly figures outside. They were moving in tandem now, their liquid shapes undulating in unison. It was hypnotic and unsettling. "Anything on the sensors?" Voss asked. Tasha shook her head, her hands gripping the controls. "Nothing useful. Just the rift's usual insanity, fluctuating gravity, distorted space. And those things." She gestured toward the viewport. Mira, seated at the comm station, spoke up. "The signal's still stable, but the voice is changing. It's harder to understand, Like it's fading. Fading? Voss repeated, his frown deepening. It keeps repeating the same phrases, but there's less clarity each time, Mira explained. It's like whatever's sending it is breaking down. Then we need to move faster, Voss said. He activated the intercom. Morales, Reeves, status report. Lena's voice crackled through the speakers. We're almost done. Another hour, maybe less. Make it faster, Voss said grimly. As Lena tightened the final bolt on the device's central module, a deep, resonant vibration reverberated through the ship. It wasn't mechanical, it felt alive, a sound that thrummed in their bones. What the hell was that? Cole asked, his voice edged with panic. The rift, Lena said. It's collapsing. The voice echoed through the ship, weaker now but still pleading. Please, hurry. Only chance. Lena's stomach twisted. She knew time was running out, but she also knew that rushing could mean catastrophic failure. She turned to Cole. We need to run the power sequence. If we overload it, we're done for. Cole nodded, his usual gruffness replaced by grim determination. Let's do it. They powered up the device, the ship's systems flickering as the alien technology integrated with human hardware. The device began to hum, its core glowing with a strange, shifting light that seemed to pulse in time with the rift's energy. Captain, it's ready, Lena said over the intercom. The crew gathered on the bridge, their faces pale but resolute. Lena and Cole stood by the device, its alien core casting long shadows across the walls. How does it work? Voss asked. Lena hesitated. It's complicated. But the short version is, it stabilizes the rift. Think of it like a patch, holding it together long enough for the energy to disperse naturally. If it works, we might even be able to reverse some of the damage. And if it doesn't? Tasha asked. It could rip us apart, Cole said bluntly. A heavy silence fell over the room. We don't have a choice, Voss said finally. Do it. Lena nodded and activated the device. The rift responded immediately. The swirling lights outside the ship surged, their colors intensifying until the void was awash in a brilliant, kaleidoscopic glow. The ghostly figures surrounding the ship shuddered, their forms flickering erratically. Energy levels spiking, Mira reported. I don't know if the ship can take this. Hold steady, Voss ordered, gripping the edge of the console. The device's core pulsed faster, its light syncing with the voice that now echoed through the ship in a desperate crescendo. You must finish, please. Lena's hands flew over the controls, adjusting the power output and stabilizing the flow. Sweat dripped down her face as alarms blared and the ship groaned under the strain. Come on, she whispered. Hold together. The rift began to change. The chaotic swirls of light and gravity started to coalesce, forming patterns that were almost geometric. The ghostly figures outside dissolved, their liquid forms merging with the glowing energy. The device is working, Lena said, her voice shaking with relief. But the relief was short-lived. Captain, Tasha shouted. We've got a new problem. Gravitational forces are off the charts. The rift's pulling us in. Brace for impact, Voss roared. The ship lurched violently as the rift's gravity surged. Lena was thrown against the console, her vision swimming. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and the Wayfinder shuddered as if on the verge of tearing apart. We're not gonna make it, Cole shouted. Yes, we are, Lena snapped, dragging herself to the controls. She diverted every ounce of remaining power to the engines and the stabilizers, overriding safety protocols. The device emitted a final, blinding pulse of light, and the rift's energy surged outward, pushing against the ship like a tidal wave. For a moment, Lena thought it was over, that they had failed. But then the energy began to recede, the swirling chaos outside giving way to calm, empty space. The Wayfinder drifted in the sudden stillness, its systems barely functional, its crew battered but alive. As the emergency lights flickered on, Lena slumped against the console, her chest heaving. Cole sat beside her, his face pale but alive. We did it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena nodded, too exhausted to respond. On the bridge, Voss stared out at the now stable expanse of space where the rift had once been. The ghostly figures were gone, but their presence lingered, an unspoken reminder of what had been lost and what had been saved. The voice returned one last time, faint and fading. Thank you. You gave us peace. and then it was gone, leaving the crew of the Wayfinder alone in the vast, silent void. The Wayfinder hung in the void, a battered shadow of its former self. The rift had stabilized, its chaotic energy subsiding into a quiet, swirling luminescence that looked almost peaceful. Inside the freighter, however, there was no peace, only a grim race against time. Lena leaned over the cracked console in the engine room, her fingers trembling as she typed commands into the barely functional interface. Sparks rained down from exposed wiring overhead, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt circuits. "Engines are fried," she muttered. "We've got enough power for life support, but if we don't get propulsion back online soon, we're dead in the water." Cole sat against the wall, cradling a bruised arm. He grimaced. "You sure the rift's done messing with us? Because it still feels like we're one bad jolt away from snapping in half." Lena didn't answer. She didn't have the energy for Cole's fatalism, nor did she have the heart to argue. Every ounce of her focus was locked on the controls. "Morales, report," came Captain Voss's voice through the intercom, rough but steady. "Engines are shot," Lena said. "We need to scavenge parts from auxiliary systems to even have a chance of limping out of here." "How long?" Lena hesitated. 3, maybe 4 hours, if nothing else breaks." "You've got 2, Voss said. "We don't know if the rift's truly stable yet, and I'm not taking any chances. Do whatever it takes." The connection cut off with a hiss of static, and Lena sighed, rubbing her temples. 2 hours, Cole scoffed. "Sure. Let's just pull a miracle out of thin air." "That's the plan," Lena said, her voice flat. "Now shut up and help me." The crew worked like a hive of bees, each person laser-focused on their tasks. Mira stayed at the comm station, monitoring for any lingering anomalies. Tasha wrestled with the damaged navigation systems, her jaw tight as she struggled to coax the ship's star map back online. On the bridge, Voss stood at the viewport, his gaze locked on the faint glow where the rift had been. It wasn't just emptiness, it felt alive, as if the rift's presence lingered in the silence. "Captain," Mira said quietly, "the signal's gone. Completely." Voss nodded. "Good. Let's hope it stays that way." In the engine room, Lena and Cole worked with feverish intensity. They stripped power couplings and wiring from auxiliary systems, patching together a crude propulsion grid. Every so often, the ship groaned ominously, and Lena would glance at the ceiling, half expecting it to cave in. "Hand me the arc welder," she said, holding out her hand. Cole passed it to her, his expression grim. "You know, if this works, we'll probably set half the ship on fire." "Then we'll put it out," Lena said, not looking up. "Or die trying." Cole chuckled dryly. "You've got a hell of a survival instinct, Morales." Lena paused, glancing at him. "You're still here, aren't you?" Cole didn't reply, but the faintest smile tugged at his lips. After what felt like an eternity, the jury-rigged propulsion system sputtered to life. The engines emitted a weak, uneven hum, but they held. "We've got thrust," Lena said, leaning back against the wall. "Barely, but it's enough to move." Cole let out a shaky laugh. "Well, I'll be damned. You actually pulled it off." "Not yet," Lena said, pushing herself to her feet. "We still have to get out of here." The Wayfinder began its slow crawl away from the rift. The engines groaned and sputtered, but they held together, inching the battered freighter closer to safety. On the bridge, Voss monitored their progress, his knuckles white as he gripped the console. "Tasha, how's navigation?" "Still glitchy," Tasha said. "But I've got a rough heading. We're on course for known space." "And the rift?" Tasha glanced at the viewport where the faint glow of the rift was slowly fading. "It's quiet. For now." Voss nodded. "Good. Let's keep it that way." Hours passed, the crew working in shifts to keep the ship stable. Lena dozed fitfully in the engine room, her back against the wall. Despite the exhaustion, her mind raced with fragments of the rift signal, the alien schematics, and the ghostly figures that had haunted them. She dreamed of light swirling, infinite light, and a voice that echoed in the vastness. "Thank you. For listening. For understanding." When she woke, the words lingered in her mind, a faint but persistent whisper. The Wayfinder finally limped into safe space, the stars ahead familiar and steady. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief, their exhaustion giving way to tentative hope. "Captain," Mira said, her voice shaky but triumphant. "We're back in known territory. Signal beacons active. Someone should pick us up soon." Voss nodded, his shoulders sagging. Good work, everyone. We made it. Later, as the crew rested and waited for rescue, Lena sat in the engine room, staring at the faint glow of the device they'd built. It was inactive now, its purpose fulfilled, but it still radiated a quiet energy that felt alive. Cole joined her, his arms crossed. You thinking about what we left behind? Lena nodded. Yeah. I keep wondering if we did the right thing. Cole shrugged. We survived. That's what matters. But it wasn't just about us, Lena said softly. The rift, it was alive, Cole. And it trusted us to save it. Cole was quiet for a long moment. You think it's really gone? Lena didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and touched the device. For a split second, she thought she felt something, warmth, like a heartbeat. She pulled her hand back and stared at the device, her mind swirling with questions that had no answers. As the Wayfinder drifted toward rescue, the crew remained silent, each lost in their thoughts. Outside, the faint glow of the rift lingered on the edge of the horizon, a reminder of the vast, unknowable universe and the fragile, determined humans who dared to explore it. And somewhere, deep in the darkness, a whisper echoed. Thank you. The Wayfinder drifted toward the rescue vessel, a gleaming silhouette against the backdrop of familiar stars. For the first time in what felt like days, the ship's alarms were silent. The hum of the engines was faint but steady, a fragile heartbeat keeping the battered freighter alive. Lena sat alone in the engine room, staring at the inert alien device they had built. Its core had dimmed to a faint, pulsing glow, like the last embers of a dying fire. She traced her fingers along its surface, the alien metal cool to the touch. Despite its stillness, she felt it thrumming with something, an echo of the rift's voice, faint but insistent. You gave us peace. The words lingered in her mind, a bittersweet reminder of the impossible task they had undertaken. The rift was gone, its swirling chaos replaced by calm, but Lena couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the end. Cole's voice broke the silence. You're still staring at that thing. Lena looked up to see him leaning against the doorway, his arms crossed. He looked as worn out as she felt, his face pale, his arms still bandaged from the chaos of their escape. It's hard to explain, Lena said. But it feels alive, somehow. Like a part of the rift stayed with us. Cole snorted, stepping closer. If it's alive, it's a hell of a lot quieter than the last one. I'll take it. Do you ever think about what we left behind? Lena asked, her voice soft. Cole hesitated, his gaze dropping to the device. I try not to. That place was a nightmare. It wasn't all bad, Lena said. It was beautiful, in its own way. Like it was trying to show us something. Cole shrugged. Maybe. But I'm just glad we're out. I don't need any more ancient mysteries screwing with my head. Lena managed a small smile. Fair enough. On the bridge, Captain Voss stood with Mira and Tasha, watching as the rescue vessel approached. The crew had been silent for hours, the weight of their experience pressing heavily on them. Comm signals clear, Mira said. They're ready to dock. Good, Voss said, his voice tired but firm. Let's get everyone off this rust bucket and into a proper ship. Tasha hesitated, glancing at the faint glow of the rift on the edge of the viewport. Do you think it's really over? Voss followed her gaze, his expression unreadable. We did what we could. Whatever's left out there, it's not our fight anymore. The docking procedure was smooth, the rescue crew moving quickly to stabilize the Wayfinder and transfer its exhausted crew to safety. Lena stayed behind until the last possible moment, reluctant to leave the alien device behind. You coming, Morales? Cole asked from the airlock. Lena nodded, giving the device one final glance. Yeah. I'm coming. As the crew settled into the rescue ship, the mood was subdued. They had survived, but the cost weighed heavily on them. 2 crew members had been lost in the chaos, their absence a constant ache. Voss gathered the remaining crew in the ship's briefing room, his expression as grave as they'd ever seen it. We made it, he began, his voice steady. And that's no small thing. What we did out there, it's something no one's ever done before. We faced the unknown, and we survived. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. But survival's not the same as winning. We lost good people, and we walked away with more questions than answers. Whatever the rift was, it's gone now. But the galaxy's full of things like that, things we don't understand. And if we're going to keep exploring, we need to be ready. Lena felt a lump in her throat as Voss's words sank in. He was right. The rift had been just one mystery in an endless expanse of stars. There would be others, bigger, stranger, more dangerous. And they'd face them the same way they always had, together. Later, as the rescue ship prepared to jump to hyperspace, Lena sat alone in the observation deck, staring out at the faint glow of the rift, now barely visible against the stars. For a moment, she thought she heard the voice again, faint and fleeting. "Thank you." She closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. "Goodbye," she whispered. The ship's engines roared to life, and the stars outside stretched into streaks of light as they jumped to safety, leaving the rift behind. But for Lena Morales, the journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of space, the remnants of the rift waited, a quiet reminder of humanity's place in the universe, and the courage it took to face the unknown.